Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Microsoft 365 Business Boost Show. I am very, very excited. If you're a returning listener, then you know I get extra excited when we have a guest on. But first, let me introduce my co-host here, Nick DeCourcy. Nick, what's going on?
Hey, Therman, how are we doing today?
Excellent. Cannot complain. Sun is out. Everything is, looking great. We do have a returning guest with us here. My guy Greg Zelfond, the SharePoint maven, the SharePoint OG, if you will. You know what I'm saying? Greg, how you doing?
Very good, very good. Looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, same here. Now, dude, I just want to jump right into it because there's a lot of a lot of discussion around AI right now, but this wouldn't be the Microsoft 365 Business Boost Show if we didn't mention AI. But today, we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is SharePoint. So there's a lot of AI talk along with SharePoint these days. We had Caruana from Microsoft on a few episodes ago, and we had a discussion about what was going on there. And some of those things are now coming to end users. One of the first things I want to talk about is just a general idea of where you think SharePoint might be going now that AI in SharePoint, that they've decided for some reason to call it that instead of just Copilot. AI in SharePoint, where do you see this going? The future of AI within SharePoint?
Well, that's $1 million question, I guess. I honestly, I don't think I have a good answer for you, because I don't think anybody knows. The rate of speed, the rate of change that we've seen over the years, just with regular features, is enormous, and now we see pretty much the same, happening with AI and Copilot. I think, my opinion is that Microsoft just tries, to obviously stay competitive. That's why we see all this, pressure and all those features, I guess, dumped on us. But I don't think, to be honest, my honest opinion, I don't think the user adoption is there, or at least where Microsoft wants to see it.
Yeah, I absolutely 1000% agree with that. I don't think the user adoption is there. Not today. The more that we would have of that would definitely give us a better indication of what we could expect in the future. I would tell you that I think even without the user adoption today, from my own personal experience, from working with SharePoint, from working with clients, I think we have potential. There's potential there. But what you can do with SharePoint, with AI and SharePoint, needs to be geared more towards what employees and employers can do with the tool. Like what can they do with this technology? Does it apply to their practical day-to-day? And user adoption will shoot through the roof, even if the cost is, a little shaky, something you gotta wince at. Nick, what about you? What do you think about AI adoption and what the future of SharePoint looks like for businesses?
I think the problem that we're running into is that we are ending up with different versions of the same product in lots of different places. And it's becoming a little bit unclear as to which you use when and for what purpose. And thinking about that, I'm considering the fact that we now have the floating AI in SharePoint widget, for want of a better word, that exists there, which is similar to the Copilot one that we see elsewhere. We have Copilot in OneDrive, we have AI in SharePoint, we have Copilot in Teams. They all kind of address a similar data layer. And we're fixing the same problem in lots of different ways in lots of different places, as opposed to really looking at what is the set of problems that we need to fix end to end across a business where this technology could be helpful, and implementing radically different approaches based on what might be useful in all of those places. And I think what that, in my mind, is bringing us towards is a situation where you might do a very similar thing in OneDrive or in Copilot Chat or in SharePoint or in Teams, focused on the same data. And from an adoption perspective, like what we actually want these products to be and how we want them to be used, we want them to be different. We want them to be distinct. We want them to take a different role in what the user is doing day to day and choose the right tool for the job. And I think that the AI strategy right now is maybe making that harder than it needs to be. What I think that should be, that's trickier to say. But for me, AI in SharePoint should be more about things like autofill columns, things like automated document processing, document understanding, the OCR capabilities that we see in Syntex, these kinds of enterprise level, do it at scale tools, as opposed to just jump into a SharePoint site and chat back and forth. We already have Copilot for that.
Right. Yeah. I think that what this might do or is doing is kind of exposing Microsoft at a faster rate, because they do this. They've already been doing this. When we took SharePoint to the cloud, they could make updates quicker, and then we saw rapid output of things that we didn't ask for. And like some of these updates were really good. I think was 2026, 2024, I believe. They were on fire with all of these releases for SharePoint. It was like out of control. I believe I'm thinking of 2024. But over the time, ever since they went to the cloud, ever since they took it off premise and we've gone to the cloud, there have been things that SharePoint has needed for years that they're still not doing for whatever reason. Instead, they're jumping in front of it with these other updates, and going to the cloud made it easier for them to do that. Now going to AI, they're doing what Microsoft has already done. That description you just gave, we could pick another time period and do that same description, because this is what Microsoft does. I'm not, I mean, I don't know what's going on here, except Microsoft is going to Microsoft. So, Greg, now let's talk about your particular customers. Is there any recent features, speaking of these rapid rollouts, any recent features that, you've been using with your clients that you've seen like some real, really good user adoption on, like anything recently that you could think of?
And you mean AI or other features in general?
No, just anything, any recent updates for SharePoint that the customers are enjoying or that you're enjoying deploying to the customers.
Yeah. So I don't think I have one. Actually, there has been a bit of I guess negative feedback on the document library update that kind of caught many users, including myself, by surprise. And I'm still trying to adjust to the new look and feel. And in all honesty, I don't think we really benefited from that update. I think in many ways it just made the whole thing more confusing. But there are some positives to the recent announcement that Sync will support up to 1 million documents. That's obviously a welcome addition. I mean, obviously this is still not available, will soon be rolled out, but obviously that's a huge issue for majority of my customers who still prefer to synchronize stuff locally on their computers.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this document library, because again, back to what I was just talking about. Here's, at risk of sounding like I'm gonna, keep taking shots at Microsoft, it needs to be said. What is really, really wild to me is that the good thing about that update is that, it was a good update. You know what I mean? Like it gave new features. I get why they were doing things with the layout. Like it was a decent update. The problem is lists and libraries should be similar. They should just be similar, period. You know what I'm saying? Because they work in the same kind of interface. Why would you, for years, keep these things in sync, in the way that they look? Take a list and keep the action button, if you will, the new item button on the left. Go to the document library and move the action button all the way to the right. Why would you do that? You know what I'm saying? The only reason I see what has happened there, and that's just one button, that's the action button, things have shifted. Like the very actively used edit and grid view button. Why is that off from how a list looks? So I think that this is crazy because Microsoft overall, you can think these different departments seem like they don't talk to each other. And it's like they're a big organization, it's $1 trillion organization. Fine, I get it. These different departments are not talking to each other. But we're talking about one application inside of this whole entire organization. So are you telling me that the document library team, whoever's overseeing that, and the list team, they're not in a meeting on a weekly basis or quarterly or something to where they say, hey, relax with the update because people use lists and libraries. You're taking us completely out of sync when you do that. Nick, any thoughts on this?
Well, I think you know, Microsoft is in a tough spot with this because you know, they're a very big organization. If you waited for everyone to be happy with everything, we'd still be using Windows 95. You know, like that idea of you're going to get alignment across the entire organization, it's never going to happen. And so things need to move forward, and they need to move forward in a way that is flexible enough that we're not waiting forever for everything to update. But I think sometimes that potentially swings in the wrong direction. And there are some changes that are made that perhaps don't feel so big or impactful to the people that are making them internally at Microsoft, but disproportionately feel big or impactful to the people who are using the product. And I think that is something to do with understanding that dynamic around how people are using things. When we talked to Caruana a few weeks ago, I know one of the questions I asked was with the rush to get stuff out with AI now, is that changing the way that Microsoft is having to relate to customers and learn about customers? And, you know, in fairness, I think Microsoft does a fairly good job at this. I think there's lots of opportunities to engage with Microsoft, to give feedback. You don't have to be an MVP. You don't have to be a large organization. You don't have to be a partner in order to do it. Like anyone using Microsoft, you can connect with people and you can find ways to give feedback and to get involved in community activities and so on and so forth. I think that's one of the really nice things about Microsoft. So they're not going to get it right all the time, but at the same time, I think it's legitimate to ask the question of why are there so many of these missteps or misfires? You know, I would give the example of the Microsoft 365 Copilot app, where that apps button has now like it's become a joke at this point. Like it's just going round and round the screen. Like it's like spinning a wheel on a game show and you never know where it's going to land, you know, like where's it going to be on screen and what apps are going to appear when you click on it. And I'm sure there are some people who are working very hard on getting that right, and they probably have very good reasons as to why they're moving it. But I doubt that if they're doing that, they're seeing the big picture of how this impacts people and how, you know, ultimately, do you care where the apps button is? Like, I would rather it just sit somewhere and I'd be able to say to people, hey, this is where the apps button is, and then 2 months later when I come back to them, it's still in the same place. That would be my personal preference with that. But I mean, that's a small point. The document library thing is bigger.
But I tell you what though, it's the concept I think still remains, right? Like, because if you are in a Microsoft, again, big organization, right? It's very easy for the person who calls the shots somewhere to say, go ahead, ship it. You know what I'm saying? To be removed from that final landing place where the end user is working and doing their job, and then they click something and it's like, what? Like, what's happening? Or I just opened up the thing today and I see the button all the way across to the right-hand side. That person who called that shot probably called the shot and like went on vacation for 2 weeks or something. That they're not as intense as maybe the people like who are on the ground here, even trying to help Microsoft out by saying, hey, I can guide you through some of these changes. You know what I'm saying? Like the three of us do here. We're intense about it. We're on the ground. We're seeing it up close and personal, higher and higher and higher up the food chain. They're so removed that it probably is comfortable for them to ship and not really feel the blowback. The blowback might happen 3 levels down from them. You know what I'm saying? Like, who knows what's going on in there? Because again, it's a very, very large organization. Now, I will give them some props. I'm not gonna, give them the piece of my mind this whole episode. There's a feature, and Greg, you can tell me if you touched this yet, but they have moved a new workflows button into the listen library. So there's a button up there that says workflows. Now, we had workflows before, some basic stuff like, we could introduce rules to our lists. We could not just rules, but then we could do flows. We could add flows to our list. But now there's this workflows button that has built out workflows from Power Automate that makes it super easy.
That was a nice addition for sure. Yeah.
I love this. I love this thing. I tested it out a few times before it became available because I wanted to see what I was working with, but I was waiting for it to become available so that I could start making content on it and telling people, look at this cool thing you now have, use it, because it just makes building workflows easy for an end user, which is something I would happily tell a client, look what you can do. What do they call that? Mad Libs. It's you just fill in the blank, hit save, and now we go. You do have some experience with this, right? You said you played around with it a little bit? The
Just a
workflows
little
button?
bit. Yeah, just a little bit. But I think it brings, because in the past, right, the experience was for the users to obviously, well, there was really no good experience. They had to open a Power, navigate to the waffle in the upper left-hand corner and navigate to Power Automate and discover that there is a new tool that exists. But now, essentially, the functionality is brought directly to the user. So I definitely applaud that. That was a good addition, good change.
Yeah. I think that's where we should want to go. Is there another tool that can work with SharePoint to automate things? Yes, it's called Power Automate, but Microsoft, for whatever reason, said it was low code, no code, which I disagree with. So it exists, but you're not asking COOs or CEOs or other people throughout leadership or even management to get in there and learn that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think that that's practical. But if you say now, okay, so the gap we have is that Power over there and Power Automate, how can we bring it in SharePoint and make it easy for those people who are, running a business to do things? And
so
that's what I feel like
you say the CEO
shouldn't
be using that, Therman. I guess the question is of those features that you've got in. I'm just looking at a document library on screen here as I'm talking, but you've got workflows, you've got AI actions, you've got integrations, like all these. Who are these options for? Because I think that's a little bit unclear right now. Like, are we expecting that every end user is going to understand like the whole range of things that are there? Are we expecting IT to facilitate it? Are we expecting team managers to understand what these things are and tell their staff to go and use them? Like, I think that the question is broader than adoption. It isn't just like adopting the product. It's selecting like what parts of the product are you adopting in which roles and at which level. And to me, that's a little bit unclear right now. So what's your approach to that? What are you telling people?
So I see this very useful for, and so the employee. Now, I know everybody in the business is an employee, but I mean, like, it's maybe leadership could get in there a little bit and some managers, but there are people who exist, these same folks who find themselves creating these intricate spreadsheets. They got their macros and their highlighted columns and their multiple tabs and their pivot tables and all this other stuff. Those people, one, understand their job, right? Like, regardless of technology, they understand what they need to do to produce for the company. And then they say, we can't go out and buy this tool, but let me see what I could do inside of a spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet is very flexible to let you do stuff like that. Those folks who take the time out to Google their way through doing macros or YouTube their way through the pivot tables and the charts and all this other stuff, they say things like, I'm a little dangerous with Excel, but they wouldn't call themselves an expert. Those people are the people who need to be in front of these items, because they've been tasked to do something that requires a spreadsheet, and they go, okay, let me do the spreadsheet. And now the spreadsheet has to get a little bit more intricate. It has to track who's involved. It has to do some calculations, and it has to go through an approval process maybe. If you can click that button and have a Teams message sent after you have routed a document somewhere. This is very helpful to that end user, that employee that's, sitting behind a desk that's trying to, make things happen with a spreadsheet. I've seen a lot of engagement from employees really finding this stuff cool. But that's an excellent question. I want to see what Greg, what do you think about that? Like, who are these tools for? Like, who do you see as like the primary audience behind all these features?
Anyone, pretty much, I would say everyone. I mean, look, the audience is, for the tools is vast, right? We have anyone from administrators or office admins to to CEOs using this. So I think Microsoft is just trying to appeal to all these audiences, and we ended up what we ended up with, right? That's why we have a library with all of those buttons competed for real estate on the screen. My concern in all of this is governance. All right, my biggest concern in all of this is governance. With people clicking, workflows behind the scenes, creating Power Automate workflows using their accounts. That's where, in my opinion, the problem lies.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you brought that up, because I guess we have to shift gears.
I would push on that though. Let me just push
Well,
on
what
this
would you say
point a
then,
little
Nick?
bit.
What you got?
So let me put a hypothesis on the table here that you're quite right that this is for everyone, but I want to break that set of users into two. There are some people who have legitimately complicated things that they need to do, and so understanding how to use that tool makes sense to the task that they are actually doing. And then there are other people who aren't sure what tool they should use, but enjoy clicking around and playing with things. And often they end up with a solution using those tools that is far more complicated than it needs to be, and far more difficult to govern within the context of that organization. And should they ever leave the company, should they ever leave their role, suddenly no one has any clue what is going on, because that workflow was built out of their interest. It wasn't built out of the necessity of their job. And so I think this point that you're making, Greg, about governance is so important. And I don't think that we should skip over governance. I think we should start with it, because just putting all of these options on screen for everyone without any certification that you know how to use them, by default they're just there, isn't that just bad governance out of the box?
Yes.
I mean, I was going in the governance route. I was about to get back on the poo-poo on Microsoft party, because Greg was right. The thing about that is Microsoft makes it harder. You know what I'm saying? They just do. There was a time, there's a message that I always repeat, which is that, SharePoint at one point was a admin's tool or a developer's tool. Like, you had to reach out to somebody like us to say, hey, can I do a thing? And it's like the knowledge of the governance and the execution of the governance was centralized at those teams that had to do that stuff. They then changed it and made it an end user's tool, and then they made it harder for you to do governance. That's just a fact of the matter. One of the biggest things that they did that's extremely frustrating to me, not frustrating, it's more so confusing, like very confusing. And matter of fact, I just put a video out on this the other day and tons of engagement on it, because it's a very important topic. When you create a site, there's 3 groups on your SharePoint site: visitors, owners, and members. The members group has a permission level of edit by default. Why do they have the members having edit rights by default? And for anybody who's confused about what this even means, there's 2 levels you want to choose between when you're talking about the members of your site. There's contribute, and then there's edit. And when you talk about contribute, this is like, hey, I need you to upload some documents, or I need you to submit a form, put some information to a form, hit submit, stuff like that. I need you to do that. Edit is a higher level where you can't only submit the document into the library, you can delete columns and update choices in the columns and change views and all that other stuff in the document library. Why would you give that permission by default? Again, it's by default, Why would you give that permission by default to the members of the site? And this even means if you create a Microsoft team, you got a new project going, you create a Microsoft team. Every time you create a Microsoft team, it comes with a SharePoint site, a SharePoint team site on the other side. When you stay in the Teams interface and you start granting people access, you're choosing between owner and member. You're probably likely going to be like, hey, me and a couple other people will be the owners. Everybody else I'm going to add in there as a member. Those people that they're adding in Teams as a member, they automatically have edit rights on the SharePoint sites via the members group. Why? That is crazy. Now you can put stuff in place to combat that, but why would Microsoft make it harder for you to do that? That's one example that I can think of off the top of my head. So governance, yes, is super important, and there's industries where you can be good or you can be compliant. You know what I'm saying? And you're probably, if we're talking about healthcare, you're looking to be compliant first and then, be good at, what you do, because it's just like that. That's just the way it is. So yeah, I completely agree with the governance, and I'm fired up again because that is a very confusing thing to me. I don't get it. But Microsoft did what they did. Look, well, one more before we get out of here. I do want to leave on a positive note, which is talking about, I know we talked about the future and all this other stuff, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you're looking forward to, Greg, that maybe you're like, hey, this is a positive sign, or, I like this thing or whatever? Is there anything that falls into that bucket for you with SharePoint or Microsoft as a whole?
Well, I think definitely. I mean, the integration of Copilot and AI. I mean, this is definitely the future. Um, I mean, seen some functionality that's been rolled out on the demos. I mean, they obviously look very cool, but I'm a little bit concerned once again about user adoption and governance angle on this. But I mean, hey, this is the future. I mean, it's definitely going to change how we interact with SharePoint. For example, one of the features I tested the other day was I actually created a page by using Copilot, right? So it actually helped me save quite a bit of time by placing all these different web parts and populating some, links and so on. So definitely, there are definitely lots of benefits. So I'm definitely looking forward, but I think we're still far away from it being kind of polished and ideal and easy to use. We're kind of in this transition mode at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. Nick, I'm gonna go to you in a second here, but I do want to ask real quick, Greg. You're saying that you prompted your way into creating a page, and then the page had like what you came out with was satisfying to like something that you would have created. So it had like the web parts that you would have put on there and all that
I
stuff?
would say about 80-90%. I still had to put finishing touches. I did get some of the elements wrong. It had trouble with some of the web parts, placing some of the web parts. But again, we are really in the early stages of AI being integrated into SharePoint. So I'm sure that's going to be the future.
When you changed it, did you change it via, like, you could go back to the prompt and it would edit the page, or did you have to edit the page yourself?
Both. I actually tweaked
Oh,
it a few
good.
times, but then I saw that it struggled at some point, so I obviously took over. But it did. I mean, it did help me actually save some time. And instead of populating, like, quick links was a good example. I had to populate like 10, 15 links, and I just provided the, pretty much the URLs, the text, and it built it for me.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay, good. See, yeah, Nick, I think this is a great use case, because if you are someone who, now this is good for management. I would tell this to a program manager. A program manager maybe needs to ask for some type of inventory. Without AI, I would tell them, use a page. You know what I'm saying? You don't go through email and do all the stuff that you're normally used to doing. Use a page. Put a page together that says, hey, I'm doing an inventory. Here are the instructions about how to fill this thing out. This is what I need. And then if you need to, put a document library web part at the bottom of the page, have them use the form where you can click the button and upload right into the form and get your metadata. Do that is what I would instruct somebody like a program manager to do. If you now can do that with AI, excellent use case to prompt your way through that to say, look, I got an inventory coming up. I want to be able to collect this information. Can you spin me up a page? So these features apply to different levels throughout the organization, but I think primarily the employee. But Nick, anything exciting in the world of SharePoint for you? I know you're not necessarily a SharePoint guy, but are you seeing anything exciting in SharePoint that you're looking forward to?
I think if we can get skills right and point at the right things, so the idea of AI skills in SharePoint and AI skills across Copilot generally, if that's something that becomes forthcoming, is very exciting. I think in this age of AI everywhere, there are lots of answers to questions that live in SharePoint that we haven't even started leveraging. And there's the opportunity here with the way that SharePoint works. Like we haven't even delved into the idea that version history gives us a piece by piece understanding of how work is done. I've never seen anyone at Microsoft like surface that as a concept of we've been keeping versions of documents for years. They might have been some of them might have been jettisoned for space considerations, but in general, most tenants have a lot of like history of how work got completed, who interfaced with it, who commented, all of these things, the real kind of guts of the graph data that we've got. And I think SharePoint should be the place where you're able to surface that information of not the basics of like, what meetings do I have coming up, but how do we go about this process? Tell me how this document got created. Tell me, what steps we went through before this policy got approved. All of that data lives in SharePoint. And right now, we're just touching the surface of it. And I think the more that we can get into that, skills of now, or AI and SharePoint has now got this version comparison thing. I think it's just version to version. It's not like the whole history. But the more that we can think about the semantic understanding of work that we can drive from the information in SharePoint, Microsoft has it all there. We're just not using it in a very effective way right now. And I think the more that can be surfaced through these tools, the better that Microsoft is going to differentiate itself from all the other players in the market, because Microsoft does have the data. They just need to find ways to surface it to the AI so it can use it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, one thing in particular, so I don't like when I see demos being done with AI and the demos they don't seem practical. So for instance, or useful, I should say. It's like if you have a list of 50 items, matter of fact, I'll use the risk register, which is something that I tell people you can use SharePoint to build a risk register with, right? You have a risk register and the risk register has various columns. It'll have like, your approach. How are you going to handle this risk? Are you going to accept it? Are you going to mitigate it? Like, what are you going to do? It has the impact is a score, which combines with the probability, and that's a score. And then you get a risk score. So I could do something like, hey, how many high impact risks do I have? I could ask AI to give me that, or I could literally just go to the column and filter it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, what am I asking that for? I already have the muscle memory of going to the list and being able to use a feature called filter and do it. And it probably will go faster than the AI. So I'm like, why don't you use practical examples that a risk manager might want to know? Hey, look at these risks. What's a good approach for me here? Like, I know I should attack the high risks off top, but should I? What might I be missing? You know what I'm saying? Like, what other risks should I look at? Or something like, look at this risk in particular and, reference the lessons learned from the last time we did this project and tell me how I should take, what approach I should take here, because I'm only in my second year as a risk manager and I feel a little, with a little imposter syndrome. Can you help me out? That, if I'm a risk manager and I just got to the organization, I'm using that. I'm not about to be like, hey, how many risks are high? Like, what I can do that in the list. You know what I'm saying? So to your point, I agree. You should that's the way we should be. We should surface these things that are valuable that allow us to do better work, not just keep querying the data, because these tools can query on their own. They're good. You know what I mean? So unless you
I
got
think
anything for that, Nick.
one of the interesting things that I've seen recently, and I don't know if you guys saw this, did you see the announcement of Legal Agent in Word?
I heard
I did
about it,
not.
but yeah.
So it's an agent that sits in Word, and it can work through legal documents that you've got, but it approaches it in a slightly different way in that it's got base knowledge, but you can also have like an organizational playbook for that type of document that you upload into the agent, and that it analyzes the content of the document based on the playbook that you've already established. And I think that approach, for me at least, seems to have a lot of value that you could apply to different use cases, like the one that you just described, Therman, of, you're new to a job and you want to gain the experience of the people who have done that job before you, and can you contextualize the information with AI from that point of view? That's to do with bringing data together in a more structured way than we've been doing with Copilot up until now. Like, up until now, we've been saying to Copilot, hey, I'm interested in finding out about this project, and then it goes out, it does a search, and it spits out the top 10 hits that it gets on it, which is useful sometimes, but also really unuseful when it gets stuff wrong, and it's not clear when it's got stuff right and when it's got stuff wrong, and that's one of the problems. But this idea of, I've already structured how I want to look at this, I'm going to bring that specific experience into the context, and then I'm going to look at the information that's relevant to this with that experience already in my memory. That's an entirely different way of thinking about it. And if you think about, a risk register or other ideas you brought up here, I could see that working a lot better. So I think Microsoft is they're doing some interesting things, thinking about how does knowledge actually work within an organization, and how do we bring the right knowledge to the AI. And I think this is a work in progress. It's not a done deal. And Copilot, as it is today, we're just kind of doing a search and throwing that stuff in as contextual information, is maybe step one in a journey that's going to take a while to get to the final destination.
I agree. It's V1, you know what I mean? We got to give it some time, and of course it'll get better. So I'm with you. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. I'm still going to be a SharePoint guy through and through. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what's up. Now, Greg, before we go, where can people find you, and do you have anything, at the moment that, you want people to come check out?
So yeah, I mean, obviously you can find me at SharePointMaven.com. That's my website. That's my blog. And I'm still more conservative on the conservative side of things. So you are probably not going to find too many Copilot articles, unlike maybe other consultants. I'm still more about kind of old-fashioned setups. Metadata, non-sexy stuff, the governance and so on. But feel free to check it out, and definitely will be happy to see on my blog.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want people to know, Greg described it that way, but that is still extremely powerful and extremely flexible and very, very useful to your business. So I don't want you to hear old school and classic and all that and think Greg is not with the times. I tell you what right now, SharePoint out of the box on its own, the features that it has are extremely powerful before you even get to talking about AI. So just want to foot stomp that. Nick, what you got?
Thank you.
I guess go and check out my YouTube. I always forget that this is now on a different YouTube, so I need to be like, go check out YouTube. I've been doing some different stuff there recently, just thinking about kind of broader AI issues, which I think are kind of relevant to what's going on right now. Like, you may have started adoption, you may have got past just thinking about features and be thinking about some of the more general barriers that you're running into with this. So I'm trying to approach that a little bit more thoroughly through the videos there. So go and check out what's over there. Hopefully, if you're thinking about Copilot or you're using Copilot, it'll be useful to you. How about you, Therman?
These days, just, like I said, find me on TikTok. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be going into the world of going live. So in a week or two here, I'll be testing out the live aspect of what I do. A lot of the stuff that all of the stuff that I put out online is all pre-recorded and then it gets edited and published. But we're going live, baby. So find me over there and you'll see the times. I'll probably also go live on YouTube. So make sure you check out the YouTube channel, follow over there, subscribe. But bring your Q&A. And as a matter of fact, the whole point of why I'm going live is to test out these AI features. So I'm going to do it live. I'm going to let you see what's going on here because I got to get myself spun up. And if you are interested in seeing, me walk my way through it, then, come join. I think I'm gonna be doing it daily. So there's that.
Cool.
All right, good deal. Listen, Greg, thanks again for coming and hanging out and, sharing your thoughts.
Of course.
Nick, of course, you know what I mean? Always good to hang out here with you every couple of weeks. We will see everyone watching in another couple of weeks. Appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you subscribe.